everything changed. Not all at once, but in 1,000 broken silences. I'm no longer the one who knelt just to avoid discomfort. No longer the one who stayed quiet to protect an illusion. The woman who awoke after betrayal never fell asleep. Again, at first, breathing hurt, carrying my name, looking at my reflection, thinking about tomorrow. But something inside me began to shift. Not out of bitterness, but instinct, survival. And then I understood. Losing someone isn't the end. It's the beginning of finding yourself. Night stopped being pleas and became fire. Tears weren't weakness, they were baptism. And my solitude wasn't punishment. It was sacred space. I learned to see myself through new eyes, not as the woman who was rejected, but as the woman who should have never begged for love. You're reading this and struggling to let go. I get it. But believe me, when you release what broke you, you discover a version of you that no longer needs saving. If you've ever said, I can't take this anymore, and yet you're still here, comment, I've never been the same. And thank God for that. Like this, if you've ever felt that what hurt you also freed you. And share this chapter if you know not all changes are visible. Some happen deep within the soul. There was a day when I stopped asking why me and started saying, thank you for opening my eyes. It wasn't easy. I clung to memories like they owed me something. I thought if I held on tight enough, the past would somehow make sense again. But the past doesn't return. And if it does, it's no longer home. It's ruin. That dress I wore the last time Savushu looked at me with tenderness. I burned it in silence. Not out of rage, but out of respect for the woman who no longer needed it to feel worthy. Funny how when you're shattered, you think you're being lost? But sometimes, you're being saved. I began walking alone, entering rooms without waiting for applause, speaking without fear of trembling. My voice, once so suppressed, now carried weight. Not because I shouted louder, but because I no longer apologized for existing. And that silent revolution changed everything. If you're rebuilding yourself, if your days still ache, if your faith is in pieces, know this, there is nothing broken in you. Only parts, looking for their rightful place. Comment, I'm blooming even in my ashes. Like this if you've ever realized your worth doesn't depend on who chooses you. Share this chapter if you know that some people need to hear this. Just to make it through today, I remember the day I stood before the mirror, not to fix myself, but to recognize myself. It wasn't my crown I saw, nor the embroidered gowns. I saw the cracks. I saw eyes no longer begging for approval. I saw scars I no longer hid. For the first time, I embraced myself with gratitude, because I understood that this woman, broken, yet standing, was my greatest victory. And then something shifted. I stopped acting like a guest in my own life, and I sat at the table as its owner. Not because the world gave me permission, but because I gave it to myself. I no longer dressed to be liked, no longer smiled to avoid questions, no longer lower my head to protect fragile egos. I'm the one who walks with steady steps, even when I tremble inside. The one who speaks softly, but every word carries edge. The one who doesn't need to prove her worth because she already knows it. And you can be that person too. It's not about having all the answers. It's about never again denying what you already know. Comment, today I choose to see myself with love. Like this if your reflection ever surprised you, because you finally saw the one who fought so hard to wake up. And share this chapter if you know true change doesn't begin on the outside, but the day you look into your soul and say, this is who I truly am. There was a time when my worth was measured by others' gestures, by whether they smiled at me, told me they were proud of me, chose me again and again. But that version of me no longer exists, because I learned that when you give your heart to someone who doesn't know how to hold it, you wear yourself thin trying to be enough for someone who never was. It was hard to accept. So hard because true love shouldn't hurt. But when you're loved poorly, you learn to doubt even your own light. And that was the greatest crime, making me believe my emotions were too much, that my voice was too loud, that my pain was inconvenient. Until one day, in the midst of the quietest tears, I found the phrase that would save me. I don't need to be understood to be valuable. And from there, everything changed. I began speaking even while trembling, asking for what I deserve without guilt, leaving where I wasn't loved, even when it hurt, because I'd rather have an honest wound than stay in places where I have to break myself every day just to fit. If you're also healing from a bond that made you believe you weren't enough, comment, no more halves for someone born whole. Like this, if you ever had to rebuild yourself in solitude, share this chapter if you know there are people silently fighting and they need to hear this. just to hold on one more day. The wound didn't disappear, no, but it stopped controlling my decisions. Before, every word I spoke was measured, every emotion filtered. I lived in a constant state of editing, as if I were a rough draft not yet worthy of being published. But not anymore now. I show what I feel without apologizing for feeling it. Am I sad? I accept it. Am I angry? I don't hide it. Am I happy? I don't shrink it to keep others comfortable, because I've realized everything that lives inside me is sacred. I've been told so many times that I'm too much, too intense, too emotional, too sensitive, and I believed it. Until one day I asked myself, too much? For whom? Since then, my life has been a journey back, collecting pieces of myself I abandoned just to be accepted. I'm no longer willing to shrink, not again. Not for anyone, because now I understand. It's not about being understood by everyone. It's about being true to who I already am. And if my authenticity makes others uncomfortable, it means I'm being real. Comment. I won't hide anymore just to be loved. Like this, if you've ever been judged for feeling too much and still chose not to dim your light, share this chapter if you know there are people out there waiting for permission to be themselves. Maybe you can be that permission today. For years, I was taught not to make noise, not to disturb, not to stand out too much. I was trained to be the perfect woman, but not the free one. And then I saw it. I had lived inside a golden cage, admired by everyone, except myself. My soul was screaming on the inside, but I smiled. Because I thought that was how you survive. Be quiet. Be obedient. Be useful. But at what cost? My voice? My fire? My truth? No more today. I don't want to survive. I want to live. And to live is to lift your head without fear, to choose silence when you need it, but also to scream when everything is taken from you, to love from abundance, not from need, to recognize you are not a customizable version made to please. I am light, but also shadow. I am tenderness, but also boundaries, and that makes me whole. Today, I walk without asking permission, not because I lost everything, but because I finally found myself. Comment. I wasn't created to please, I was created to shine. Like this, if you ever stopped trying to fit in just so you could finally breathe. Share this chapter of, someone needs this push, this brave whisper that reminds them, you're not broken, you're awakening. It wasn't a grand scene. There was no applause, no witnesses. It was just me, standing before a door that once caused me pain, and I closed it without rage, without drama, just with peace. And in that quiet gesture, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to be understood. I wasn't waiting for explanations anymore. I just wanted to move forward. That was the moment I realized I had healed. Not because I forgot, but because I remembered without breaking. Because I was no longer a prisoner of the past, or of the image others had built around me. I was free. Free to choose, free to dream, free to rebuild without asking permission. The world didn't change, but I did. And that changed everything. If you're also at that point, if you no longer want to go back to who you were, if it still hurts but you're choosing to move forward, you're closer to your rebirth than you think. Because it's not about being happy again, it's about discovering a new happiness. One that's yours. Comment. I closed the door and opened my soul. Like this, if you ever chose peace over pride, and share this chapter if you know someone staring at a door in fear, who just needs one reason to let go of the key. I was never the same again, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Because the woman who gave everything out of fear of losing is no longer here. Now I give, but from wholeness, not from emptiness. I no longer beg for love. I share it. I no longer ask for a place. I create it. And if I'm broken again, so be it. Because now I know how to rebuild myself with more beauty than before I was shattered. This isn't a happy ending. It's a new beginning, one without masks, without chains, without the need for approval. Today, I know who I am. And that certainty is worth more than any crown. I don't need thrones. I don't need titles. I just need to be at peace with my reflection. And I am thank you to everything that hurt me, because it taught me what I deserve. Thank you to the one who left, because they left room for me. Thank you to the empty nights, because they led me directly to this radiant version of who I am today. Comment. Thank you, God, for not letting me stay the same. Like this, if you've ever hit rock bottom, and from there, planted your wings. And share this chapter if you know someone who needs to hear this right now. Because some pains come like storms, but when they pass, they leave behind a clearer sky. And if this chapter spoke to you, subscribe. There are more stories, more truths, more chapters where the soul is the protagonist. See you in the next episode, where I'll tell you how what seemed like the end was actually the beginning of something eternal.